For more than 3,000 years, one Egyptian murder case survived in two places: in a court papyrus, where palace insiders were put on trial, and in the pharaoh's own mummy, where a modern CT scan found the cut across his throat. Start with the body. Ramesses III was not just a name in a king list. His mummy survived, and when modern researchers scanned it, they found something earlier observers could not see clearly under the wrappings. There was a large, deep wound across the throat, below the larynx. The BMJ study argued that the injury was consistent with a sharp blade and could have caused immediate death. That matters because ancient texts had already described a conspiracy against this pharaoh inside the royal household. This is why the story is different from a normal ancient mystery. Most royal murders from deep history are rumors, accusations, or later legends. Here, the case has two kinds of evidence. A judicial papyrus records a palace conspiracy and trials. The mummy preserves bodily trauma that fits a fatal attack. The guardrail is important. We cannot prove every private conversation, every exact hand, or every conspirator's role beyond doubt. But the two lines of evidence meet in a way that is rare. Text names the plot, and the body shows the wound. Ramesses III ruled during the 20th dynasty, near the end of Egypt's New Kingdom power. He is often remembered as one of Egypt's last great pharaohs because his reign still had the scale and confidence of empire. At Medinet Habu, his mortuary temple shows monumental scenes of royal power, battle, ritual, and victory. The inscriptions and reliefs present a king defending Egypt against enemies from land and sea. They are not neutral journalism. They are royal propaganda carved into stone. But they still show how Ramesses wanted to be remembered as the defender of Egypt. That public image makes the private ending sharper. This was not a weak figure buried in obscurity. This was a pharaoh who staged himself as a cosmic protector and military survivor. Yet the most dangerous threat may have come from inside the controlled world of the palace. The story is not just that a king died. Kings die. The shock is that a ruler wrapped in divine ideology, guarded by ceremonies, servants, courtiers, and family hierarchy, could still be reached by a blade. A murder story can become too simple if it starts and ends with one villain. Ramesses III's last years happened inside a kingdom under pressure. The records from Deir el-Medina describe workmen protesting because their rations were late. This is often discussed as one of the earliest recorded labor strikes. Whether we call it the first or one of the first, the point is plain enough. Even the workers tied to royal tomb building could feel the system failing. That does not mean a food shortage caused the murder. It means the palace conspiracy belonged to a late-reign atmosphere where confidence was thinning. A king could still build, command, and display power, while the machinery underneath him was becoming more fragile. That contrast is the hidden tablet pattern. The monument says one thing, the paperwork says another. Stone says victory. A labor record says missing rations. A judicial papyrus says insiders were tried for a plot against the king. And the mummy says the body did not die quietly. The key text is usually called the Judicial Papyrus of Turin. It records trials of people accused in what modern historians call the harem conspiracy against Ramesses III. The papyrus is not a detective novel. It is an official legal record. It lists accused people, describes categories of guilt, and records punishments. Some were presented as active conspirators. Others were accused of knowing and failing to report. The document also preserves the disturbing fact that judicial officials themselves could be punished for improper contact with the accused. The ancient record is concise, and that is exactly why we have to be careful. It does not give us a scene-by-scene reconstruction of the murder. It does not let us see inside every room, but it does tell us that the state treated this as a serious plot, centered inside the royal household. The word conspiracy can sound modern, almost cinematic. In this case, it is not just a trailer phrase. It is the structure preserved by the court record: accused insiders, trials, punishments, and a succession crisis around the throne. One name gives the story its palace betrayal charge, Ta. She was a woman inside the royal household, commonly described as a secondary wife of Ramesses III and the mother of Prince Pentawere. The papyrus connects tie to the plot to put her son on the throne. That is the core claim we can use. The careful version is not that we know every detail of her planning or that every later embellishment is proven. The careful version is that the judicial record presents her as a key figure in the conspiracy. This is where the title earns itself. The enemy was not only foreign, it was not only the chaos beyond Egypt's borders. The accusation came from inside the palace world: household, succession, intimacy, ambition. Royal households were political machines. Marriage, childbirth, rank, inheritance, and access to the king all mattered. A woman near the throne could be boxed in by hierarchy, but proximity also created possibility. The papyrus preserves that possibility in its darkest form, a succession plot against a living pharaoh. The conspiracy is usually explained through succession. Ti's son, Pentawere, was not the heir who ultimately took the throne. The plot, as reconstructed from the texts, aimed to move power toward him instead. That does not make Pentawere a cartoon villain. It makes him a royal son inside a deadly system. In monarchies, succession is not a family argument with better furniture. It is the question of who becomes the living center of the state: the temples, the army, the court, the estates, and the future. The papyrus records severe judgments. Some accused people were executed. Others were allowed or forced to kill themselves. Modern scholars debate the legal meaning and nuance of those punishments, but the scale of punishment shows the state saw the case as an attack on more than one man. To murder a pharaoh was to tear at the ideology of kingship. The body could be cut, but the state also had to repair the story of power. Trials did that work. They turned palace violence into official judgment. The conspiracy texts are not only about blades and access. Some related documents describe magical practices, including wax figures and spells used as part of the plot. That can sound like a modern writer adding supernatural color. But in ancient Egypt, ritual power belonged to the same world as medicine, religion, kingship, and protection. To accuse someone of hostile magic was not to add a fantasy subplot. It was to accuse them of using a real category of dangerous action as their culture understood it. This does not mean magic killed Ramesses III. The CT evidence points to a physical wound. The point is stranger and more historically grounded. The plot may have mixed court politics, household access, succession ambition, and ritual aggression. That combination gives the case its texture. It was not only a knife in a corridor. It was a palace world where words, names, bodies, gods, and power were linked. The conspirators were accused of attacking the king through more than one channel, and the court record treated that seriously. This is the honest gap in the story. We do not have a security camera. We do not have a confession transcript that lets us reconstruct the exact room, minute, and hand. The temptation is to fill the darkness: a shadowed queen, a silent hallway, a guard looking away, a blade drawn under linen. Those images work for a thumbnail, but they are not the same as proof. The evidence lets us say there was a conspiracy and that Ramesses III suffered a severe throat wound. It does not let us overclaim every stage of the killing. That restraint makes the case stronger, not weaker. If we separate evidence from atmosphere, the core remains disturbing. A ruler who survived major external threats was caught in a domestic plot. A legal record names palace conspirators. The body shows a fatal wound. Ancient history often asks us to choose between dramatic storytelling and careful uncertainty. This case lets us do both. As long as we label the darkness correctly, the unknown room is part of the truth. For a long time, the end of Ramesses III remained debated. Ancient texts made the conspiracy clear, but whether the plot actually killed him was not always treated as settled. Then came modern imaging. The BMJ study used CT scanning and found a deep wound in the throat region. The injury extended through soft tissue and was interpreted as a lethal cut made by a sharp object. Researchers also noted an amulet placed in the wound area,
likely inserted during mummification as part of healing or protective ritual.
That detail is almost too perfect for a story, but it is evidence, not decoration. The embalmers did not erase the wound. They responded to it. The body carried both violence and ritual repair. This is the moment where the case stops feeling like a rumor. The papyrus says the palace had a conspiracy. The mummy says the king's throat was cut. The modern scan does not prove every defendant's action, but it strongly supports the claim that the pharaoh died violently. The BMJ study also examined a mummy known as Unknown Man E, sometimes connected in discussions to Pentawere. Genetic analysis suggested a close relationship to Ramesses III, consistent with a father-son relationship. But this is another place for caution. The identification is not the same as a name tag. The evidence is suggestive, not a clean final label that settles every question. Unknown Man E was buried in an unusual way, and that has fueled interpretations about punishment, shame, or a condemned royal son. For the video, the useful point is not to pretend the mystery is solved more completely than it is. The useful point is that the forensic investigation widened the case. Researchers were not only scanning one royal mummy, they were comparing bodies, family relationships, burial treatment, and the ancient account of trials. That is why the murder of Ramesses III feels modern. It has documents, suspects, motive, punishment, a body, and forensic testing. But it remains ancient because the gaps never fully close. The Judicial Papyrus of Turin records more than a plot. It records the state trying to restore order after the plot. The lists of accused people and punishments are brutal. Some were executed, some killed themselves. Some officials who crossed lines with the accused were mutilated or reprimanded. Modern legal analysis shows the papyrus is more complex than a simple list of villains. It distinguishes kinds of involvement, concealment, and misconduct. That complexity matters for the guardrail. We should not say every conspirator had the same role. The evidence does not support that. Some may have acted, some may have known, some may have failed in duty. Some may have been punished for behavior around the trial itself. The story is still dramatic, but it is not a mob scene. It is a court record from a royal crisis, and court records have categories. The closer we look, the less the conspiracy becomes a single shadowy group, and the more it becomes a network of people caught at different distances from the crime. Most ancient murders disappear into story. A chronicler accuses someone. A later writer adds motive. A body is lost. A tomb is robbed. The evidence splits apart. Ramesses III is different because the case survived in layers. Monumental Egypt gives us the public king. Administrative Egypt gives us late-reign strain. The Judicial Papyrus gives us the conspiracy and trials. The mummy gives us a throat wound. Modern CT scanning gives us a way to see beneath the wrappings without destroying the body. That is why the title works. The pharaoh was murdered in his own palace. It is sharp, but the careful version underneath is stronger. Ancient judicial texts record a palace conspiracy involving members of the royal household and trials of accused conspirators. Modern CT evidence supports that Ramesses III suffered a severe, likely fatal throat wound. The final image is not only a murdered king, it is history behaving like evidence. A palace tried to bury a crisis in judgment and ritual. 3,000 years later, the papyrus and the body still answered each other.